She was frustrated, on the verge of giving up. She believed her lecturer hated her, targeting her, deliberately breaking her spirit. Nights found her in tears, questioning everything. What she didn't know was this: he cried at night too. And the reason behind his tears would break your heart. Fate would cross their paths in the most unexpected way, revealing painful truths and quiet similarities neither of them saw coming. Just when healing and connection began to grow, one event threatened to destroy it all. If you love deeply emotional, heartwarming romantic stories, subscribe, like, and share. This is Bella's story time. No one ever forgot their first encounter with Professor Min Jae-hyun, and not because it was pleasant. At 58, he was one of the most respected academics in the institution, a man whose name appeared in journals students could barely pronounce. His lectures were precise, his expectations unforgiving, and his presence intimidating. He never raised his voice, yet his silence could undo even the most confident scholar. Students whispered that he had ice where his heart should be. So when Aisha Bello walked into his office for the first time, she felt it immediately. The room was immaculate books, aligned by height, papers stacked with surgical neatness. Professor Min did not look up when she greeted him. He simply pointed at a chair, eyes fixed on her thesis proposal. Minutes passed. The clock ticked loudly, mocking her nerves. When he finally spoke, his words were sharp, clipped, and distant. "This work," he said, "is below standard. It will require discipline. Emotional writing will not survive here." Aisha swallowed. It wasn't just criticism, it was dismissal. From that day on, she was convinced the professor hated her. Every supervision meeting felt like a quiet battle. He corrected her relentlessly, returned drafts soaked in red ink, and never once praised her effort. When other students laughed with him in the corridor, he barely acknowledged her existence, and when he did, it was always professional, always cold. Aisha tried to understand. She told herself it was cultural, or perhaps racism, or maybe she simply wasn't good enough. But late at night, alone in her dorm room, she cried not just from academic pressure, but from the weight of feeling unwanted in a foreign land. What Aisha didn't know was that Professor Min cried too. In the quiet of his apartment, when the university lights dimmed and the city softened into sleep, the professor removed the mask he wore so well. His home was spotless, modern, and painfully empty. No children's shoes by the door. No family photos on the walls, only framed certificates and academic awards. On one shelf sat an old photograph he never dusted. It showed a younger version of himself standing beside a woman whose smile had once promised forever. He hadn't spoken to her in decades. By the time he was ready for love, she had already built a life with someone else. That night, like many others, Professor Min stared at his phone, scrolling through messages from former classmates' birthday wishes, accompanied by photos of grandchildren, family dinners, laughter he had never known. His hands trembled as tears slipped silently down his face. He had achieved everything society respected, and lost everything the heart needed. At the university, Aisha noticed small things that unsettled her assumptions. She saw how Professor Min lingered near the campus kindergarten every morning, pretending to read notices on the board while children ran past him laughing. She noticed how he stiffened whenever colleagues discussed family holidays. Once, during a faculty event, she caught him staring too long at a professor's newborn baby before abruptly leaving the room. Still, none of that softened his treatment of her. Until the evening, everything changed. Aisha had stayed late in the research building, struggling to fix a section of her thesis he had harshly criticized earlier that day. Rain poured heavily outside, trapping her inside long after the corridors emptied. When she finally gathered courage to knock on his office door, she expected irritation or worse, silence. Instead, Professor Min looked up, surprised. "You're still here?" he asked. She nodded, apologetic. "I wanted to understand what I did wrong." Something flickered in his eyes. He had a brandy in his hands, so he might have been drinking. In his eyes was not anger, not coldness, fatigue. He gestured for her to sit. For the first time, he didn't speak like a professor. He spoke like a man tired of holding himself together. He explained not just the flaws in her work, but the reason behind his strictness. He spoke of excellence, of time wasted, of how quickly years disappeared when one postponed life in the name of achievement. His voice faltered once, just once. And then, unexpectedly, he told her a story. He spoke of a young man who believed love could wait, of a relationship he abandoned for conferences and deadlines, of birthdays missed, promises delayed. He spoke without looking at her, staring instead at the rain streaking the window. "When I realized," he said quietly, "there was nothing left to return to." Aisha listened, frozen. That night, she didn't see a feared professor. She saw a lonely man standing at the end of his life's long corridor, wondering where it had all gone. When she left his office hours later, something had shifted. Not love, not yet. But a door had opened. Neither of them noticed the figure standing across the courtyard, watching the lights in Professor Min's office remain on far too long. No one could quite explain when it started. There was no announcement, no scandal, no obvious moment that marked the change. Yet slowly, almost imperceptibly, Professor Min Jae-hyun began to feel different. It began with small things. He started arriving earlier to the office, not to work, but to sit by the window with a cup of coffee untouched. His lectures, once rigid and mechanical, softened. He paused more, asked questions, even smiled once during a student's presentation. The class froze in disbelief. A smile from Professor Min was unheard of, and Aisha noticed everything. After that rainy night, their meetings changed. He no longer spoke at her. He spoke with her. He explained, listened, corrected without cruelty. He still demanded excellence, but now there was patience beneath his words, as though he wanted her to succeed not just academically, but personally. Aisha didn't understand why she cared so much. At first, she told herself it was gratitude, compassion, respect. But soon, she found herself lingering after meetings, asking questions she already knew the answers to, bringing extra copies of articles she thought he might like. When she learned he often skipped meals, she began carrying simple food, nothing dramatic, just quiet offerings placed on his desk. He always hesitated, then accepted. What neither of them admitted was how much those moments mattered. Professor Min hadn't shared meals with anyone in years. As weeks passed, Aisha's presence extended beyond academia. She helped organize his office when his arthritis flared. She ran small errands he never asked for but secretly appreciated. Once, when he mentioned in passing that he hadn't cooked in months, she showed up the next evening with ingredients and asked if she could use his kitchen. He almost said no. Instead, he watched her move around his apartment, laughing softly as she struggled with unfamiliar appliances, humming songs from home, and felt something dangerous stir in his chest. Warmth. Life. For the first time in years, the silence in his home felt less oppressive. He told her stories, not all at once, not dramatically, just fragments missed weddings, colleagues who stopped inviting him to family gatherings, the regret of believing time would always be generous. Aisha listened without judgment. She never pitied him. She simply stayed. And staying, he realized, was the rarest gift. At the university, whispers followed. "Have you noticed Professor Min lately?" He laughs now. He even attended the faculty lunch. Students felt it too. The man they once feared now encouraged discussion, mentored gently, and stayed behind to help struggling scholars. His productivity improved. His energy returned. It was as if someone had quietly switched the lights back on inside him. But not everyone celebrated the change. Professor Han Seung-ho, Min's longtime rival, noticed immediately. Han had always lived in Min's shadow. Same field, same generation. But while Min's work received international acclaim, Han's remained local, overlooked. Years of envy hardened into resentment. So when he saw Min smiling with a student, that student, his instincts sharpened. He began to watch. He saw Aisha leaving Min's office late. Not often, but enough. He noticed her carrying groceries into the professor's apartment building one evening. He observed how Min defended her work fiercely during departmental reviews, something he had never done for anyone before. To Han, this wasn't kindness. It was weakness. And weakness could be weaponized. Still, Aisha remained unaware. To her, the relationship felt safe, gentle, human. She didn't think of it as love, not yet. She thought of it as companionship, something both of them desperately needed. She told herself she was simply filling a void, helping a lonely man find peace. But the heart does not listen to logic. One evening, while sorting old papers in Min's apartment, Aisha discovered a box tucked away in a cabinet. Inside were letters unsent, yellowed with age, written to a woman whose name appeared again and again. Confessions, apologies, dreams, postponed, until they disappeared. She didn't read all of them. She didn't need to. When Min noticed the box in her hands, his face drained of color. For a moment, he looked like a man caught naked in public. "I should throw those away," he said quietly. "Why didn't you?" Aisha asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he sat down slowly, exhaustion pressing into his shoulders. "Because some mistakes," he said, voice breaking, "deserve to be remembered." That night, Aisha went home confused, her chest heavy with emotions she refused to name. She knew one thing with painful clarity. Whatever this was, it was growing beyond what either of them could control. And somewhere across campus, Professor Han began compiling evidence. Photos, timings, observations. Not to tell the truth, but to destroy a man who had everything Han never would. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning. It was brief, polite, devastating. Aisha stared at her screen as the words blurred together, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the sounds of the campus around her. She had been summoned by the university's Ethics and Conduct Committee. No explanation, no accusation, just a request for her presence and an attachment marked confidential. By the time she finished reading, her hands were trembling. Across campus, in a quiet office that smelled of old books and burnt coffee, Professor Min Jae-hyun received the same message. He did not flinch. He had known this day would come. Not because he believed he had done wrong, but because happiness, for him, had always arrived with a price. Professor Han Seung-ho watched from a distance, satisfaction curling in his chest. The investigation moved quickly, too quickly. Whispers spread through faculty corridors like wildfire. Students noticed meetings canceled, doors closed, voices lowered. The university, proud of its reputation, wanted the matter resolved before it reached the public. Officially, it was about professional boundaries. Unofficially, it was about image. Aisha sat alone in the committee room, surrounded by faces that were polite but distant. They asked careful questions. When did the meetings start? Why were they often late? Had she ever visited his home? Did she feel pressured? No, she answered truthfully, again and again. But truth, she soon learned, was rarely enough. Photos were placed before her grainy images of her entering Professor Min's apartment building, timestamps highlighted in red, a log of her extended office visits, statements from unnamed staff who had noticed a change. She felt exposed, reduced, like a problem that needed erasing. When Professor Min was questioned, he took full responsibility. "She is my student," he said calmly, "and I failed to maintain appropriate distance." The words hit Aisha harder than the accusations. Failed? That night, he called her for the first time. "Do not come to see me anymore," he said gently. "For your sake." She protested. He listened in silence. "I have lived my life making choices that protected my work and destroyed my heart," he continued. "I will not let you pay for my mistakes." What he didn't tell her was the private meeting he had already requested. In a closed-door session with the dean, Professor Min offered his resignation. The university hesitated. Losing him would hurt their rankings, but protecting their image mattered more. They suggested a compromise. He would step down quietly. Aisha's scholarship would remain untouched if she agreed to leave his supervision and keep silent. Professor Han, watching the pieces fall into place, felt victorious. But victory can be fragile. Aisha found out about the resignation by accident through an administrative notice pinned to the board. Her legs gave way as she read it. Anger replaced fear. She marched to the ethics office, demanded answers, and refused to be erased. "This is not justice," she said, voice shaking but firm. "This is convenience." For the first time, the committee members looked uncomfortable. Yet the decision stood. Professor Min was asked to clear his office within the week. On his final day, Aisha waited outside, hidden among students who had come to say goodbye. He emerged carrying a single box. No speeches, no farewells, just quiet dignity. Their eyes met. Nothing was said. But in that moment, Aisha understood the truth he had tried to hide. This was not love that broke rules. This was love punished for existing too late. As Professor Min walked away, Professor Han stood nearby, pretending to offer sympathy. Min paused. "Be careful," he said softly, meeting Han's eyes. "Some victories echo longer than you expect." Han laughed it off. He didn't notice the junior lecturer standing behind him, someone who had seen the emails, the manipulation, the deliberate timing of the complaint. The whistle had been blown. But not the only one. Years passed. Not gently, but deliberately, as though time itself needed distance from what had happened. Aisha completed her degree under a different supervisor, one who respected her brilliance but never truly saw her. She graduated with honors, her name earning quiet recognition within international academic circles. To the outside world, she was a success story, an African woman who came to Korea, survived, and triumphed. But inside, she carried a silence no certificate could fill. She never heard from Professor Min again. At first, she checked academic publications obsessively, searching for his name. When it stopped appearing, she knew he had truly disappeared. Sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, she wondered if he was alive, if he had returned to loneliness, or if regret had finally broken him. What she didn't know was that Professor Min had left Korea entirely. After his resignation, he accepted a low-profile research role abroad. No lectures, no committees, no applause, just work and solitude. He lived modestly, refusing interviews, declining recognition. For the first time in decades, he had nothing to prove, and nothing to look forward to, until the email arrived. It was an invitation to an international academic conference in West Africa, a keynote panel on ethical mentorship and power dynamics in education. The irony did not escape him. He almost declined. Then he saw her name, Aisha Bello, lead researcher. He stared at the screen for a long time, unsure whether fate was mocking him or offering something he had never been brave enough to ask for. On the day of the conference, Aisha stepped onto the stage with calm confidence. The room listened as she spoke clearly, powerfully, without bitterness. She spoke about ambition, boundaries, and the human cost of rigid systems. She never mentioned names, She never told their story. But Professor Min heard it anyway. When their eyes met across the room, the world narrowed. They did not rush toward each other. They did not smile. They simply acknowledged two souls, recognizing an unfinished sentence. Later, beneath a quiet veranda as evening settled, they spoke for the first time in years. "I thought you hated me," Aisha said softly. "I was afraid of you," Min replied. "You reminded me of everything I lost and everything I still wanted." He told her the truth then, about the whistleblower, about the junior lecturer who later exposed Professor Han's manipulation, about how Han lost his position quietly, disgrace tucked neatly under administrative language. "And you?" she asked. "Why didn't you fight?" "Because I had already spent a lifetime choosing myself," he said. "I wanted to choose you even if it meant losing you." There was no anger left between them. Only clarity. This time, there were no rules broken, no imbalance, no secrets, just two adults standing on equal ground, changed by time, but not emptied by it. Professor Min did not ask her to follow him. Aisha did not ask him to stay. Instead, they walked side by side, slowly, deliberately, like people who finally understood that love was not something to chase, but something to meet when ready. Some stories end loudly. Theirs ended honestly. And for the first time in his life, Professor Min did not feel late. He felt on time.